I've seen a few videos recently with Adam Savage talking about the cool blaster and everything that he can get for his Lego minifigs. And I started thinking about cosplay and how you could invert that. So suddenly, instead of somebody dressing up like something, what if that something wanted to dress up like a person? Like, oh, I don't know, a Lego minifigure that looks like Adam Savage. Huh? Huh? How about I show you how to make the ultimate Christmas stocking stuffer? And what that amounts to is make a me-nifig. Not minifig, me-nifig. These things are so cool and they put a smile on everybody's face. Hands down, it doesn't matter who they are. They always smile when they get one of these. A little while ago, I was very lucky to work with Adam Savage, and I got a 3D scan of his head. And I want to show you what you can do with these scans. What do you do if you don't have a scan of your head? Well, there are several methods of scanning your head. I worked with the first layer once and did a scan with a sensor bar from one of the gaming systems that we have, and you can see the video down below. And as well, you can see on Uncle Jesse's YouTube, he shows you how to do this with ScanD Pro with your iPhone. Now, you can do it with an iPhone or some of the new models of Android. It really doesn't matter, but essentially the same thing applies for most of these 3D scanners. The link will be down below for you to look at and figure out how to do a scan of your head. Once you're done, you want to open up Meshmixer. Now, Meshmixer is a free software that you can use to edit and modify the 3D scans. Here, check this out and I'll walk you through a real quick demonstration of how to make this. You have your scan. Now, the scan that we have of Adam here is super high resolution, way higher than we need. Let's remember that these heads are like, a few millimeters wide. They're not very big at all. So what we can do is we can dumb down the detail in this. And usually that is going to be the number one thing to make happen because a lot of computers can't handle super high resolution meshes. So let's hit select. We're just going to do Command A or Control A, and that will select all the pixels and everything in here. Now, once you have that, you want to come into Edit and you want to reduce. Once you do that, in this case, the mesh is so dense that I can take it down to 90%. And just take a quick look at the resolution here. It's very smooth. Once we take it down to like 90%, it's going to look a little pixelated. But again, let's remember that this thing's going to be like super tiny, like super tiny. And because it's super tiny, you're not going to see the details. Like you're not going to be able to see individual hairs and all that kind of stuff. So we can make it really pixelated. In fact, the scans that I have on my head are really crappy, yet they do just fine as a Lego minifig. So come in here. You can draw this slider back and forth, but your computer's going to re-render it every time it moves a certain amount, and it's going to eat up a whole lot of processor. So usually I just come in here and you can type in, take a look at what 50% did, then take a look at what 70 and 90, and find a good happy medium. In fact, I'd be willing to bet that I could take this down a little more, but let's just take a quick look and see what it looks like. There we go. Now, you'll notice if we zoom in a little bit that you can start seeing the little triangles that are happening here. In this case, this would probably do, well, heck, let's just take a look at this and let's go to 95%. I'd be willing to bet that once we do this, it will look just fine, especially for one of these. There we go. Okay. So in this case, it's still at 95%. This will be fine because remember, you're going to be looking at it like that. And you haven't lost any details when you've gone that small. So we've got a much smaller mesh that we can deal with. In this case, you look up here. We're not in the right orientation. And sometimes you want it to be, in the end, you're making a 3D model and you're going to place it in your printer. So it's not super important that you get this perfect, or line this perfect, but it definitely helps. So what we're going to do is we're going to come into Edit. Then we're going to do Transform, and we're just going to rotate the head around like this. Let's take a look at the front and make sure when you're doing the Lego minifigs heads, you know, if you did something like that, it would look like he's looking up all the time. You do that, he's looking down. So get something where not quite looking horizontal, maybe up a little bit, and that should be good enough. And I'm going to raise Adam's head up just a little bit here, just to the main top plane, and that should be pretty good. We can go to the top, and again, this is one of those alignment things. So what I'm going to do is we're going to keep doing the transform. We're going to go 90 degrees. Oh, and you can see because of this, because of the angle I put him at, he's kind of tilting at an odd angle. So there is a point where you end up sort of tweaking quite a bit just to get everything going. So get the head as square as possible and rotate it back a little bit. Just go back and forth until you get something that you think will look good. In this case, that. And let's just look at the front view. That looks pretty good. Maybe a little too high or looking up too high. Let's go to the front. Perfect. So now we've got that. We'll accept this. Now, we don't need his shoulders or anything like that, so we're going to chop his head off. We're going to do a plain cut. We would never want to chop Adam's head off. And we're going to slowly bring this down to a point where we're going to just go to the front view. Now, that looks pretty good from a front view. Let's do a side view. That looks pretty good there. You're going to have the neck and everything in here, but in this case, this looks pretty good. And if you find that it's cutting the wrong side, this area is obviously not the area we want to cut off. We want to cut the shoulders down. There's just this little arrow here. Click on that and hit accept. We need to make sure that this is the right size for a Lego minifigure head. I found that 12 millimeters or ½ inch is generally the best width of the head. So how do we make that happen really quickly? In Meshmixer, you can come into where am I? Units. Okay, so you hit actions and then you want to find units. And what it's going to do is it's going to tell you the size here. And this has got 249 millimeters along the X. So if we look here, there is, 249. Oh, there we go. 249's here. Then we have the 268 is tall, and we have the 179. That one is what we want to be 12 millimeters. So we're going to come in here. We're just going to highlight that. And we're going to type in 12. And everything will adjust immediately after we click out of there. So we'll hit enter. And you'll notice that now we've got something that's 12 millimeters wide, 17.9 millimeters deep, and 16 millimeters tall. We're almost there. So we hit done. Now we've got a head that is sized properly. Now we need to establish the peg hole inside of the Lego minifigure head. Now, the best number that I have come up with so far is 4.9 millimeters. It generally gives you just enough friction that things will snap on. Now, if you are doing resin prints, they are not very forgiving. And if you don't do the 4.9 or 5 millimeters, what ends up happening is you press the head on, it's going to be a little too much stress and it's going to pop or break the head. It's going to fracture like a little piece of glass. And you don't want to do that. So, make sure you do 4.9 millimeters. If you're doing an FDM print, however, they're a lot better at allowing some stretch in the plastics. It's got some necking ability. So in that case, you got a little bit of flexibility. At this point, what we need to do is we want to come into Meshmix. We want to find a tube. We're going to drag and drop that in here. And at this point, we need to have a tube, which in this case is huge compared to the head. We don't want that. Here's the size, the X, the Y, and the Z. So we want something that's 4.9 millimeters here, and suddenly it's super thin. It turns out that Z is the other 4.9, which gives us a long, tall tube. And the next part here, I've found that about 7 or 8 millimeters, let's just go for 8 millimeters tall, is generally pretty good for an analog for a Lego minifig. And we're going to hit accept. Now let's go to the bottom view where we're already selected on this. Now, if you find that you're selected on something you don't want to be selected on, you can click it and it will switch. But we can also go into here and hit view, show objects, browser, and here we go. We can see the two things that we've made here. This will help you a little bit in the next stage. We've got that tube, we need to position it. So let's go back to edit. We're going to transform. And let's just drag this guy over here. And you'll notice that sometimes when you do this is that the grid that is allowing you to drag, it's not letting you drag it, do that fine detail that you want. And part of that is that we don't have the scaling, the snap step correct. So we're going to come in here, we're going to say, 0.2 millimeters for that. And now you'll notice that we can get that fine detail that you want. And you just generally want to find that flat and place this right in about the middle so that you get wall thicknesses that you can use here. And we've got that set up. We're going to go to the front view and make sure that this pin goes in far enough. You come in all the way there, just enough so you can see a little bit of it sticking out. You definitely want some of it sticking out because it'll make the next move easier. And we're going to hit accept. Now we've got these two pieces. How do I make that tube turn into a hole? So we're going to select Adam's head first. We're going to press and hold shift, and we're going to hit mesh or that tube. At this point, it will come up with a menu over here, and it says Boolean union, Boolean difference, and Boolean intersection. We want the difference. Give it a second, and you'll notice that it cut that hole in Adam's head. Now, if you hit that and Adam's head disappears and you still have a tube, it's not a big deal. It just means that your selection order was not correct. Select the thing you want to remove from first, and then the tool to do the removing next. And at that point, you've got a perfect little guy here that you can print off and throw onto a Lego minifigure body. I can't stress this enough. This is so simple. You throw this in your printer, be it a resin or an FDM, and print it off. These things on an FDM printer, I think I got it down to like 10 minutes for the average head. A resin printer works a little differently, and if you go and put on one head, it might take like 15 or 20 minutes to print that one head. But on one of those beds, you can fit a lot of little Lego minifigure heads. So you can make multiples of the head, or you can have different scans of people, place them all on there and print them off really quickly. Yellow resin works really well. See what you can come up with. And what we're going to do is we're going to call these me-nifigs, not M-I-N-I-F-I-G. It will be M-E-N-I-F-I-G. So get yourself a me-nifig and have some fun. So if you want to do this, you'll see links down below for Amazon as far as the filament that maybe you can use or the resin you want to use, the Elgu Mars 3D printer that I used for Adam's head. And, just go out and have some fun. This is really a simple project. It costs literally pennies minus your time to make these things because they're so small. And 3D printing is about 12 minutes, I think, regardless of whether it's a resin or a filament printer. If you're going to do bulk and a bunch of heads, then I recommend a resin printer because you can do multiple heads all on the plate, and suddenly that time goes down to a couple of minutes per head. The resin is inconsequential as far as how much it costs. So go out there, have some fun, and make people happy by creating me-nifigs.